From Frankenstein to I, Robot to I have no mouth and I must scream. What is it about great science fiction that makes it so compelling? Why is sci-fi one of the most popular genres to read and watch year in and year out, even among people who, like yours truly, aren't particularly science-minded? Science fiction is one of my favorite genres to read, even though I write very little of it. Still, I think that reading science fiction has taught me some of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned about writing. Lessons I've applied to work in other genres that fit more with my story ideas and voice. In this video, I'll discuss 5 sci-fi short stories that I've found especially valuable as a writer. So valuable that I give them to my students every year in both my English and creative writing classes. And I'll also be sharing a few of the rough writing lessons that I've learned from each of those stories. So how did I choose this list? What criteria did I use? First, I wanted all of these to be well anthologized and easily accessible. You can find most or all of them online somewhere or in many Norton readers. I'm not giving you rare gems, I'm giving you common gold that's passed through many hands. But I promise you, each one is good in its own way. And if you read it closely and actively with a writer's eye, it'll pay dividends in your work down the road. Second, all the stories had to be short enough to read in a single sitting, even with modern attention span. I teach these stories to Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So stories like Bicentennial Man by Isaac Asimov or The Machine Stops by E.M. Forster are out simply because of length, not quality. Third, they all had to be written in English. Nothing against stories in foreign languages. I love them. As a matter of fact, these guys are some of my favorite authors of all time. But I wanted viewers to be able, if they can read English, to read the exact same story that I read. Not a translation, which might vary from the original author. Because a translation is always an interpretation. I'm not knocking translations. Some of my favorite works I've only ever read in translation. But language is crucially important to me as both a writer and a writing teacher. So it's something I'm going to focus on for each of these stories. Hence why I want to read works in their original language, in the author's own words, not in the translator's interpretation of those words. And sadly, the only language I can read fluently is English. I know. I'm somewhat familiar with a few other languages. At least written English is, if I have one, my field of expertise. Take that for what it's worth. So please note that this is not a top 5 or even a my favorites list. It's simply a list of stories that meet the previous criteria and that I've taught year after year to my creative writing and English students. You might like them too, and they might help you as a writer. That's all. So the inclusion of certain stories in this list is not meant to imply exclusion of or superiority to other sci-fi stories of merit. Also, I am not trying to quibble about the definition of science fiction or the distinction between hard science fiction and soft science fiction, or whether or not certain works belong more in the category of science fantasy. Once upon a time, science fantasy was the catch-all term for all of what we now call science fiction. And all 5 of these stories at least fall into the broader science fantasy realm. Few readers would be upset at any of their inclusions in a sci-fi anthology. I'm going to try to keep this spoiler light for you, by the way, because I want you guys to really get the experience of reading these stories on your own if you haven't read them yet. But there's probably going to be a few, so you've been warned. Now that all the caveats are out of the way, I know I'm still going to get yelled at in the comments, but whatever. Here they are, in no particular order. Number 1, Kurt Vonnegut, Harrison Bergeron. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the HG men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. Yes, the great dystopia of equality. Read Harrison Bergeron to discover the many uses of irony. From the opening line to the on-the-nose climax to the punchline ending, the narrator's ironic tone holds us in its grasp. And this humorously unsettling voice comes with a creative use of the omniscient point of view. This omniscient narrative voice does something that typical first-person or third-person limited points of view can't do: direct characterization. Instead of showing us a character acting as stupid or strong and having us infer those qualities about the character, the author or the narrator straight up tells us that a character is stupid or strong, tells us who is who and what is what. Normally, this would be tacky or even insulting to the reader, but thanks to the detached irony, the ironic tone of the narrative voice, it works. See if you can pick out the many layers of irony built into Harrison Bergeron. Go beyond the narrator's clever verbal irony, although certainly pay attention to it, but look at the structure of the story itself. For instance, do the handicaps that people wear really produce the end-state total equality that they're hoping for? Or do they instead just draw deeper attention to naturally existing inequalities? Then after you've read that carefully, try your own hand at writing a scene or a piece of flash fiction with a unique narrative voice and multiple layers of irony. Play around with it a bit and reread that Kurt Vonnegut story a time or two and see what kind of creativity comes out. Number 2, Ursula K. Le Guin, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. With a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, the festival of summer came to the city Omelas, bright towered by the sea. The rigging of the boats in harbor sparkled with flags. In the streets between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss-grown gardens and under avenues of trees, past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. Some were decorous, old people in long stiff robes of mauve and gray, grave master workmen, quiet, merry women carrying their babies and chatting as they walked. Joyous! How is one to tell about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. But we do not say the words of cheer much anymore. All smiles have become archaic. Omelas sounds in my words like a city in a fairy tale, long ago and far away, once upon a time. Perhaps it would be best if you imagined it as your own fancy bids, assuming it will rise to the occasion, for certainly I cannot suit you all. We've gone from ironic dystopia to beautiful utopia, with a cost. Le Guin's attempt to get us to believe in the possibility of a perfect city makes use of a unique point of view, the limited omniscient narrator. And she claims her omniscience and her fallibility all at once when she throws the responsibility upon her readers to create the city for ourselves. But my God, Le Guin's prose, her use of assonance and consonance and alliteration, and her mix of simple and more complex sentences and sentence structures, and the way her sentences just roll and tumble over each other in such a gorgeous tapestry. The mix of musicality and vivid imagery is just brilliant. I'll sometimes try to imitate Le Guin's style as a writing exercise in writing a descriptive paragraph or two. And it always comes out too ornate, comes out too flowery for me. But when I go back to writing in my own voice, some aspects of that stick with me and my description improves. A trace of that other voice that I attempted has added flavor to my own prose. This is a great exercise for a lot of writers, by the way, not just Le Guin. If you read a passage that you like, try to imitate it yourself. Write your own style of that passage, and then forget about it and go back to writing your own way. See what little bits stick with you. I'm not encouraging plagiarism, by the way. I'm just encouraging you to feed your mind actively to develop more possibilities for your prose. And I kind of did adapt this from Ursula Le Guin. Omelas is less a story than it is a vignette. It's the exploration of an idea. There's no characters, there's no journey or story arc to really follow. But there is a structure to the story. Beyond the detached point of view and the exploratory narrative voice, which are great devices to try in your own stories, by the way, this structure is another big takeaway that inspired my writing. Even without a character to follow and root for, Le Guin still propels the reader forward through beginning, middle, and end via the gradual reveal of information. It's the clever play with mystery that keeps us compelled. In Omelas, we explore the city from top to bottom, literally, the very bottom. That's the order in which the story is told. And it's from that bottom at the climax that the twist comes in that leaves readers thinking and talking about this story for ages. To support that, I first read this story in a philosophy and science fiction class years and years ago in my undergrad days in the early 2000s, and we argued about this story for days in that class. It was that good. So read it and see what you can glean about voice, structure, and the gradual unraveling of mystery. Number 3, Robert Heinlein, All You Zombies. 2217, Time Zone V, estimated 7 November 1970, NTC, Pop's Place. I was polishing a brandy snifter when the unmarried mother came in. I noted the time, 10:17 p.m., Zone 5, or Eastern Time, November 7th, 1970. Temporal agents always notice time and date. We must. The unmarried mother was a man, 25 years old, no taller than I am, childish features, and a touchy temper. I didn't like his looks. I never had. But he was a lad I was here to recruit. He was my boy. I gave him my best barkeep smile. Speaking of the gradual unraveling of mystery, this one will knock your socks off. So much so that, more so even than any of the others, I really don't want to spoil this one. So find All You Zombies and read it. Then, when you've picked yourself up off the floor, read it again and look for what it does with character. Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? Who's the love interest? And how it plays with time. Also read it for character voice. Unlike the omnipotent narrators in the previous 2 stories, Zombies is told in the first-person narration of one of the major characters in the story. So how does the narrator's diction and syntax help to characterize him? Notice the longer sentences, shorter sentences, sentence fragments, particular tone words. What connection does this draw between him and the other characters? Then try writing your own first-person narrative. See what kind of interesting characters you can explore through your own word choices. Yes, this is also one that I read in that philosophy seminar class. It was part of our discussion on the philosophy of time, and it introduced us to the concept of a philosophical zombie. And it did so in Robert Heinlein's brilliantly sardonic prose, with one of the best setup and payoff combinations in all of fiction. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far and you'd like to support the channel, please consider clicking the join button down there and becoming a member. You can get some cool perks for a few dozen pennies a month, and you'll help me out immensely. You don't need to, of course, but if you do, I'd appreciate it oh so much. Thanks to my current members, and back to the video. Number 4, Ray Bradbury, There Will Come Soft Rains. In the living room, the voice clock sang. Tick-tock, 7 o'clock, time to get up, 7 o'clock, as if it were afraid that nobody would. The morning house lay empty. The clock ticked on, repeating and repeating its sounds into the emptiness. 7-9, breakfast time, 7-9. In the kitchen, the breakfast stove gave a hissing sigh and ejected from its warm interior 8 pieces of perfectly browned toast, 8 eggs sunny side up, 16 slices of bacon, 2 coffees, and 2 cool glasses of milk. Today is August 4th, 2026, said a second voice from the kitchen ceiling, in the city of Allendale, California. It repeated the date 3 times for memory's sake. Today is Mr. Featherstone's birthday. Today is the anniversary of Talita's marriage. Insurance is payable, as are the water, gas, and light bills. Somewhere in the walls, relays clicked, memory tapes glided under electric eyes. We go from a fascinating exploration of character and time to a story with no characters that takes place at the end of time, or of human time anyway. Yes, in this story, our main character is a house. A smart house, you might say. Our old dream for AI, where artificial intelligence would cook our meals and do our laundry and clean our rooms and keep our calendar and leave us free to do fulfilling creative work instead of the other way around. But it's a smart house serving humans whom, for reasons that will shortly be revealed, are not around anymore. The house continues to go about its functions. It fulfills its programming to the bitter finish. This is another story that doesn't have an arc, since it doesn't even have a conscious or sentient character, but still has a compelling beginning, middle, and end to follow that draws us all the way through the story. And my God, does it have themes. I could teach this one for a week in my English class, delving deeply into analysis of what it says about us as individuals, about human society, about human progress, about war, about our relationships to ourselves and to technology, etc., etc., etc. What do you expect? It's Ray Bradbury. The man can make us empathize with a house. How could you not want to emulate him? See what you can do in turning settings into characters. This can be useful even in scenes with human characters, because in many of the best scenes, setting has a significant impact. Such an impact that the time and location could be called a character in its own right. If you can bring character out of inanimate places and objects like that, and if, like Bradbury, you can interweave themes and make your readers think as much by what you leave out of the story as by what you put in, you're well on your way to becoming an impactful writer. And number 5, last but certainly not least, Arthur C. Clarke's The Star. It is 3,000 light years to the Vatican. Once I believed that space could have no power over faith, just as I believed that the heavens declared the glory of God's handiwork. Now I have seen that handiwork, and my faith is sorely troubled. I stare at the crucifix that hangs on the cabin wall above the Mark VI computer, and for the first time in my life, I wonder if it is no more than an empty symbol. I have told no one yet, but the truth cannot be concealed. The facts are there for all to read, recorded on the countless miles of magnetic tape and the thousands of photographs we are carrying back to Earth. Other scientists can interpret them as easily as I can, and I am not one who would condone that tampering with the truth which often gave my order a bad name in the olden days. Another first-person point of view, but from a very different character with a very different voice. In this case, an astrophysicist who happens to be a Jesuit Catholic on board a spaceship. And what he has discovered has, if anything, affirmed his faith in a factual sense, but at the same time, it's made him question whether or not it's right to believe. This is a different way of playing with irony than the ones we've seen so far. The setup builds the entire picture of what the narrator has seen and why he's drawn the conclusions he's drawn, all the way up to the final twist. The last sentence, which is a question that recontextualizes everything that we've read up until that point. So The Star provides another lesson in mystery reveal. Once more, we aren't seeing a traditional story arc. We do have a character, though, and we're seeing the end of that character's arc. He's already gone through the story, and we're just finding out about it in post. And it's a negative character arc, not a positive one. And the final sentence shows us why. This is a fun writing exercise I like to do, which can translate well into short story writing or even chapter setup for longer stories. Think of a mystery that you won't reveal until the last sentence of a story. Then work your way backwards, adding layer upon layer of mystery to disguise that ending, all the way back to the very beginning, where your readers will begin to unpeel each of these layers as they read your story forwards. This gradual reveal of mystery with a final, impactful payoff keeps readers hooked and gets them coming back. Apply it to your stories and see for yourself. What do you think of these 5 stories? What are your favorite sci-fi stories, and what have they taught you about writing? And what genre should I do next? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel while you're down there. And until next time, my friends, good luck and good writing. Peace.